Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Severin and today we're speaking about the new moon in Taurus happening on the 11th of May 2021. And this new moon, like every new moon this year, is just so packed and full of topics that I want to express and address with you. And on top of that, it's also marking the beginning point of entering into eclipse season. And that in itself is a highlight, right? But I guess by now, lots of you are already looking at my background and are asking themselves, like, where are you, Severin? And I'm simply shooting this video out of the office of my sister back here, home in Switzerland. And it's so nice to be back. Really, like, I'm really enjoying my family, my friends, and nature. And I'm happily getting treated and stuff with all this cheese, chocolate, and bread, and gaining some kilos. Because after all, it's Taurus season and it's time to enjoy my senses a little bit, right? So we're gonna speak about that later, how to not distract yourself from the difficult and challenging themes that are coming up. Because also, I have to say, for those of you that I haven't mentioned that I'm back here, it's not because I don't want to see you, but simply I myself are in a very difficult and challenging process. I wouldn't call it a separation. We're simply refiguring out how to manage our relationship, me and my partner, and it's bringing up a lot of themes. Also, like, we have established ourselves so much that there is so much security and functioning and knowing how to relate to each other that we are equally being able to trigger our most softest and challenging spots, right? It's like family. It's like when there is depth and there is truth coming up. And also because of that reason, I really want to be present for the process I'm in and also for my children. And it's really good to have some space or some distance just to really feel in what's true for me. But it is a difficult process for myself. And that's also why I'm still not taking on personal clients. If you come to the Hermitage in Guatemala, I'm there for you, but I'm not taking on any additional clients because I really want to be here for what's alive in me, and it's a lot as well. But I'm still enjoying a lot to make these YouTube videos because just this in itself helps me to restructure and actually name for myself what's alive, what's happening, what are the themes, and also to gain perspective to find out how to deal with all this overwhelming novelty and waking up process that's happening for us in a painful way, but also equally in a very liberating way. But I have to say, I'm really, really grateful and surprised of how much the YouTube channel is growing. We have been reaching now over 500 subscribers. So it's not just for me helpful, but it seems also for others. But I also want to tell you or to re-encourage you, like, please, like, even though I'm speaking in a camera and you're watching that and hopefully feeling connected with me, please, if that's the case, voice that, share with me. Just even if you say thank you, or just even if you want to address something, you have a question, or just tell me what in particular you have been resonating with. I really appreciate that connection over YouTube, or also for those of you who are in my private WhatsApp group, then also reach out to me personally there. That really fills me with a lot of joy and also happiness to keep going with that creative outflow that I'm cultivating here that you're watching now. So, having been speaking enough about that, let's address more this new moon in Taurus. So, what I have to say first is also just before the new moon begins, then we have like 3 days just before this phase of letting go. It's called the dark moon, or like the black phase of the moon, where we have to like let go of something old that has to die away. It's kind of mourning before the new moon, kind of a fresh beginning, a new start can arise within us. And I think I really want to address that and honor that, because the last full moon cycle, or like from the new moon in Aries to the full moon in Scorpio, and now we are beginning a new moon cycle. So that last cycle has been really strong. And that has been because we have been the new moon experiencing that in Aries, and we had a lot of planets in Aries. And when we have Aries, it's almost like this impulsivity. It can also be a bit naive, but it can also be just really direct and honest. And that seems from the outside a bit silly, or almost a bit like not caring about others. But actually, sometimes, like a child, is just acting from a place what's true for them. And I think sometimes we really need more of that energy, especially when we are so concerned about others, when we have a hard time to actually, when we can help others easier than actually step up for what's true for us. And I think this last new moon Aries was really helping us from an impulsive place, perhaps, or also just from a connecting with our guts and what's true on a physical level without overthinking it then, because, and that's the naive part, which is sometimes great to not have the monkey mind kind of in place, then acting that out and then almost being like, oops, like what have I done? Like I created such a mess. But actually it's just like the suppressed parts for once were not in your way and you acted out freely like a child. And yes, sometimes children do messy things and they hurt other people. But at the same time, they have been acting from a place of naturalness, from a place of spontaneity and being real. And if we find then a way of like speaking with others or sharing or at least being heard and not building up this pride or how things should be, and that's especially this year, like things how they should be are falling away, then that was what was leading to the full moon in Scorpio, where we perhaps were saying, well, actually now you have seen my action and this is what actually always have been there, or like where we become more honest with ourselves, and also like where it's not about the mind, how we would like to be seen and what we would like to do, but much more what's actually really alive on an emotional level, and being able to find a way to communicate that without hurting the other person, and at least trying the best to include and share from a place of honesty. And so right now, perhaps a lot has been happening the last months, a lot has been coming to the surface. And so the last 3 days is like, it's kind of a mourning and letting go. And now we're coming into this new moon in Taurus, where we again building up to then come into a full moon. And that's going to be a total lunar eclipse on the 26th of May. And lunar cycles then, or like which are building up now into eclipse season, is then when eclipses are happening like 4 times a year, maximum 6 times, and we are having the next eclipse on the 26th of May, and then we have another eclipse on the 10th of June. So in between these 2 eclipses, so between the 26th and the 10th of June, is going to be the most intense and perhaps chaotic and challenging time. And it's a little bit like when we have eclipses, it's a little bit like it's bringing up duality. It's almost realigning kind of the both extremes or the both sides within us and helping us to find balance again. And it really kind of realigns us and brings us closer to our soul journey. And that soul's journey is being pushed, and that's where eclipses can give us a theme that is alive for the next 6 months. So we are just going into that theme, and I will speak much more about that in 2 weeks when I will speak more about the full moon in Sagittarius. But now we are building up to that, where we are in Taurus. And what that has to do, I will explain to you now when I'm looking at the chart. Like as you see, I don't have a whiteboard behind me, but that's maybe also good because you actually don't have to get lost in the astrological details, but much more what resonates with you. So when I'm looking at the chart, then we have Uranus, Moon, Sun, and Black Moon Lilith in Taurus. And these all together is already a process that we have been starting to move into since the beginning of the year, because there is Uranus. And Uranus is basically this awakener in Taurus. So it has to do with our physical body. So imagine like this sense of self-worth is coming up, or this sense of what does really matter for you in your life. This sense of urgency because maybe your stability in your life, which Taurus also connects to. Let's say when we're speaking about the economical situation, then that's the worst fear for any Taurian personality, when the stability is being lost. Like it's kind of when the carpet gets taken away under your feet, or where you cannot connect, where you cannot be touchy and feely and sensual with other people. That's when Taurus doesn't feel there's a disconnection with their tribe, with their place of belonging, and also security. And when we look from an economical perspective, then we can say our sense of stability within ourselves, let's say where we don't know where we're heading in the future is getting really challenged. And that gives us then also this theme of how do we make money? How do we survive? How do we live in the future? And that's then this economy that is changing and also bringing up a lot of insecurity. And then self-worth is not your job or how you make money or how rich you are, what you have in your bank account, how big your car is or your house. It's actually not in all of these. And that means we have to look at themes that maybe are uncomfortable. And that means also ultimately, as much as we are good in working, that's not who we are, and that we are actually needing to gain that self-worth on a deeper level. And that's perhaps coming up with this new moon right now, because already last month we have been feeling that maybe we're not living exactly out how we are feeling on the inside. And that is the journey of this year, because Saturn in squaring with Uranus is this all dynamic of Saturn that is basically saying, well, this is the tradition, this is the status quo, this is the rule, this is how society thinks, and this is a law, or like how you will be judged as well, and you better conform and work on that or move on with that tradition that has once been working for you. But because Uranus is squaring that this year, and it's happening 3 times, so once in February and another one next month in June and then another last time in December, it's kind of waking up. It's almost a veil is lifted. There are actually deeper emotions, feelings, sensations that are alive in us, and that is this journey of individuation. So this like development of our own personality, of like what is really true for you, if you would actually not be restricted by some rules and regulations. And that's, but then also so scary, like, will people deny me? Will people be against me? Will they judge me? And then ultimately, like, even if they judge me, even if it hurts to say the truth, and that's why I feel so lonely, like we're going through such a deep process internally, we have to come ultimately to the place that this inner pain of not being ourselves, and that's Uranus, like challenging us on a physical, emotional, inner level, to wake up, to step up what's true for us and to embrace that. It's also that we then have to speak our own truth. And that can be very hard, because there is no reference point. There is nothing that we can copy, that we can say, this is the situation, that is the way it's being done. And this is what's coming up right now on an overall perspective. But this new moon in particular, we have an aspect by Pluto. Pluto is trining the sun. And Pluto is also trining Venus, and Venus is there with the North Node in Gemini and with Mercury. And what that means is simply there is a capacity to have a breakthrough. So it's almost like there is something on a physical level, because the body, let's say you have an experience once in your life, the body stores that emotional reactivity. Even though you're saying no, that bullying, that rejection, that lack of love, that being alone, that sadness, or whatever it is, I'm fine. Or like that separation of my parents, or that fight with my brother, or that loss of my father or mother or my sibling, or that abuse, it's okay. Like I can deal with it, I can function. And that's when we kind of move out of our body and we can function with our mind, and that's very important. But still there comes a time where we have to look again on a conscious level of what has been there once. And even though we can function again, this has to be dealt with ultimately. And that's the case right now. In the last month that has already been coming up, but this new moon is another invitation to go into that. And the Taurus is connected to our body, and the Pluto there, like being trined, even though it's let's say a harmonious trine, it's still challenging, because that means it's coming into a place where we feel that something is there that needs to be addressed, that needs to be felt, and that we need to allow. And normally what we're doing is we are functioning, we are eating something, like me, eating cheese and chocolate, we are speaking with somebody and sharing something, or we are defending ourselves, we having a reactivity where we are really jealous, or we have an addiction behavior where we go into pornography, or we go into alcoholism or social media. So there's so many ways of coping with that inner pain to not feel it, that we are actually running away from a topic that we once have to look at. And then what's happening is like we are rejecting it, we are suppressing it until it comes up to the surface. It's coming out by itself, which perhaps happened a month ago. There was something that we didn't want to look at or feel, and now that suppressed material takes almost a dynamic on itself where it's being leashed out. Now, the issue is if we are still being in defense and judgment and denial on ourselves or from the outside, or if we actually can start to feel that it's not about the righteousness, if it was right and wrong. Of course, that situation can hurt other people, but it's also to recognize where did it come from in our own lives. And that means that we actually being invited with this new moon in Taurus to reconnect with that. And Venus is this being able to feel that. And what better place is there when Venus is also there to being triggered in relationship? And that can be in a close relationship with your partner, that can be with your parents, it can be with your sibling. Any close relationship is able to stir something up that needs to be felt. So this new moon also, because Pluto is trining the Venus that's there with the North Node and Mercury in Gemini, is actually this place where we cannot hide these dynamics under the carpet anymore, because it will lead to not speaking anymore with your partner. It will lead to being angry at your sister and moving out. It will lead to not wanting to do your work anymore, or not being able to be creative and thinking even of your responsibilities at work, because you're mentally so much in that theme that upsets you and hurts you, and it wants to be felt. Everything in your body says, hey, listen. But of course, it's the natural approach of any human being to not feel any discomfort. And that is then when we need somebody else that can have a listening ear and say, yes, I understand you, but not just understand you or giving you advice, but can feel you and acknowledge you and you being accepted. So basically we are looking for somebody that can hear us and that can love us and accept us the way we are, even though we maybe are changing completely and we don't know who we are ourselves. And that then would be counseling, and it facilitates actually then when we go into therapy that we can find that way within ourselves, that we again have coming from a place where we don't have to justify, we don't have to make bigger defenses, we have to separate and deny our best friends, our deepest connection, our oldest friends, or people that we have spent so much time with, that we can soften instead and say, yes, that hurt you so much and I'm so sorry and I didn't want that, but there's also a part in me that I have denied, that I couldn't listen to, and I want to express that, and I want to share where I'm coming from. I want to tell you about something that I haven't even felt before and I couldn't even locate, but now my body keeps track and stores that. I want to express that. And that's what's coming up right now. With this new moon, it's an invitation to kind of almost go beyond what the fears are saying of how we might be judged and how society might react to how we feel, but that deep inner need is necessary to be embraced, because we are not able to live without embracing that. So that's one big part where it's really, this new moon is inviting us to share without blame and telling that it's somebody else's fault, but maybe to come back where we actually have been in a place right now that actually comes from our childhood and from our memory. And this is perhaps, and we only see that now, a reoccurring pattern that we even didn't realize before. And we ourselves are suspicious and questioning and wondering why we cannot be anymore the way we have been before. And that is then also like where we have Chiron. So there is a Mercury and Pluto sextile in Chiron in Aries, where we perhaps also realizing that this vulnerability is right now very important, that we can share what is difficult for us. So it's our choice to heal right now, but if we choose to heal, we have to drop our protection mechanism of like, we cannot heal by just going through it ourselves and just being strong. It's time to let go a little bit and also soften, and also to acknowledge that we have needs, and that there is the fear of rejection or somebody maybe denying us that need. But that doesn't mean then that we can just not say that. We don't need to mourn by ourselves. We are allowed to ask for help, and that also makes us then human, and that we are needing each other. And that's where we then again find strength, that we are realizing in the moments where we truly bring out this deep vulnerability or fear, that there is not just the capacity or the possibility of being rejected, or that fear that we have is being actually repeated. It's also the very place from where we can find healing, and people actually recognizing that they can open their hearts and understand our story better, and there is a connection that can happen from that place. Also, Saturn is there, and Saturn is squaring the Sun and the Moon and Uranus there. So that also, it's really kind of a challenging time. So just by being not doing anything and pretending nothing happens is not what's the case right now. It's actually this question right now: how can we express inconvenient topics that need to be addressed? How can we bring topics up that need to be brought up? How can we bring up something that is inconvenient? Maybe that's not ideal for the situation, but nevertheless, that's how we feel, and that's simply of what's alive for us through our physical body. And that has a lot to do also then with sensuality and sexuality, because sensuality or sexuality then is not something that we're just speaking about how do we seduce another person, but it's also how do we experience ourselves by being with different people, and actually a capacity to come further into touch with ourselves. And so therefore we have a need to come in touch with our own creativity. And if we are not able to get in touch with our core or our root energy of being creative, then we are actually going in the opposite. And that's where depression then comes from. That's where we feel we're not living ourselves fully. We are doing something for the benefit of somebody else or the situation, but long term it really hurts ourselves. And on a physical level, we feel not being healthy and alive anymore. So that's what's coming up right now. And also that's then perhaps where Jupiter and Saturn being in Aquarius since the beginning of the year, where we're having this gain of awareness, where we can suddenly step back and realize that there are patterns that we have been living out, or challenges that we actually not feeling into the pain, and we have been distracting ourselves, and we need to stop with this self-destructive behavior in order to be true to ourselves, but then also naming that and addressing that, because we are actually in charge for making our own choices. And that is really difficult, because that means we are taking our power back. We don't have to make a drama or telling other people how they behave wrong, or actually then suddenly our jealousy is not something that we can leash on other people, but we have to take responsibility of how we actually feel, that something hurts us and something is challenging, and then coming back into that original sense of being in the feeling brings us back into this present moment of being alive in our body, which is actually very challenging work, because it means there's nothing you need to do, there's nowhere to run. It just means that we have to sit with it and feel it, and then also not project in others, but actually then honor what's alive for us, and seeing if there's a possibility to bring these needs into our lives. And even maybe, even though out of the risk of not getting it, at least address it and name it, because pretending to live something that we would wish for is not the same as stepping into our needs. because one is like hoping that in the future something will happen without taking any action. And that is exactly this south node in Sagittarius, which will be activated very much with this full moon that's gonna be in Sagittarius, and it's gonna be a total lunar eclipse. And this is gonna be a theme that we are building up to. So it's a lot about letting go of old ideas, of wishful thinking. Even if it's a beautiful idea, it's still a projection into the future. It's an idea that maybe is not including your partner, and that simply is coming up right now. And then the disappointment is actually not what the other person did to you, or maybe what you are doing in your own addiction. It's the disappointment of letting go and expectations that you had, which is not turning into reality. And that means you are needing to let go of what you hoped would be, and you simply don't know what then the replacement of that would be. But simply feeling that right now gives space for something new to arise. And that will form the future to the exact degree that it will need to be. And that's not something we can already be a step ahead and knowing that already. So there's actually much more to speak. Maybe I'm addressing Black Moon Lilith as well, because that's important. It's already a long video. I'm seeing that right now. But Black Moon Lilith is a repressed, it's because Black Moon Lilith, and mentioning that because it's directly on the sun and the moon. And Black Moon Lilith represents our repressed and stuck emotions. And there's a part in all of us that there is something within ourselves that needs to come to the surface. And we perhaps are not allowing that, because what would society say? Like, what if it's a taboo? What if that's not allowed? But in order to regain our powers, we need to reconnect with that place, no matter what the reactivity will be. And that's very, very scary and very, very challenging. But to reintegrate that independence or that power of being in touch with ourselves, coming back with our inner authority, coming back to our inner creativity, means to live out what's true no matter what the reaction is around. And that is what's being activated right now, since Black Moon Lilith is there on the top of the sun and the moon. And that can be with sexuality, can be with the body, with emotional pain, trauma, like all these themes that I have already been addressing before. And right now this new moon is giving us an invitation to address things, how they actually are, what we actually feel, and maybe just including other people, what we have already known, maybe have been doubting, and we are still in a process ourselves of learning to trust this inner voice, of feeling that that is not just something that is like an impulse that's overtaking us or it's negative, but it's simply human need that wants to be lived out and wants to be acknowledged. And it's like something that needs to vent out in order to lose pressure. It's not something we can rationalize, something we can wait another year and then it's gonna be fine. It's something that's there, and if we are not addressing it, if we are not acknowledging it, it will cause serious dynamics that are taking power by themselves. And that's exactly where it becomes scary or difficult. So don't wait for an explosion, or maybe if it already happened, then simply acknowledge to now find more honesty, more communication, and addressing that and allowing to feel that and not just speak about that. And yeah, so that's for today. I really hope that has given you food for thoughts. It has connected you to your own process, and it supports you also on the journey that you are, and it brings you more home towards where your center is. With this, I wish you a beautiful new moon, and I'm gonna hear you again in 2 weeks for the full moon, for the total lunar eclipse in Sagittarius on the 26th of May. Goodbye.